My name is Rachel Morgan and I'm 35 years old now. But the story I'm about to tell you isn't just about me. It's about rejection, pain, growth, and the shocking way life sometimes turns things around when you least expect it. Before we go too deep, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Are you in the United States, Canada, or somewhere else entirely? Wherever you are, I want you to listen carefully, because what I'm about to share might just make you believe that kindness and perseverance can rebuild even a shattered heart. I still remember that night as if it happened yesterday. The night my mother, Margaret Morgan, looked me in the eye and said the words that changed everything. "Rachel, you're not up to the standards of this family." Her voice was cold, like the sound of ice breaking in water. And then, before I could say anything, she told me to pack my things and leave the house. I stood there, shaking, my hands gripping the small suitcase I'd packed for college years ago. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear my own breath. My father, Charles Morgan, sat quietly in his armchair, sipping his scotch. He didn't say a word. He just stared into the fireplace like it was easier to watch the flames than to look at his daughter being kicked out. I begged her, "Mom, please, I have nowhere to go." But she only crossed her arms and replied, "You've made your choices, Rachel. You chose to live below us. You chose to disappoint us." And just like that, she turned her back and walked away. That was the moment my world ended, or at least it felt that way. But what none of them knew was that years later we'd meet again. And this time, I wouldn't be the one standing in the cold. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in Greenfield Hills, a quiet, upper-class neighborhood outside of Boston. My parents were the kind of people who believed money defined everything: success, respect, even love. My father owned a large investment firm, and my mother came from old wealth. They hosted charity galas, golf tournaments, and fundraisers that had less to do with kindness and more to do with reputation. From the outside, the Morgan family looked perfect. We had the mansion, the fancy cars, the summer trips to Europe. But on the inside, there was a wall, a high, thick wall between my parents and me. I wasn't like them. While my parents spent their lives chasing status, I cared more about people. I volunteered at community shelters, worked part-time jobs, and spent time with kids from schools my mother called underfunded. She hated that. To her, helping people who couldn't return the favor was a waste of time. "You can't save everyone, Rachel," she'd say with that tight smile. "And trying to makes you look desperate." But I didn't care. I loved helping. I believed in empathy. Then there was my brother, Ethan. The golden child. The one who could do no wrong. He went to Harvard, joined Dad's firm, and was already vice president by 28. To my parents, Ethan was the Morgan legacy, while I was the disappointment who studied art therapy at a community college because I couldn't handle real academics. When I was 24, I tried to start my own small art program for kids in need, children who'd been through trauma. I called it The Colors of Healing. I rented a tiny studio, saved up every penny from my waitressing job, and bought art supplies secondhand. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I still remember the day I invited my parents to the opening. I decorated the walls with the kids' paintings and made cookies myself because I couldn't afford catering. The children were so proud, showing their parents the art they'd made. But when my parents walked in, my mother's nose wrinkled like she'd smelled something foul. "Rachel," she said, glancing around. "This is your big project." I smiled, hoping she'd see the heart behind it. Yes, these kids. Some of them haven't smiled in months. But look at them now. She didn't look. Instead, she turned to my father and said under her breath, "It's embarrassing." That night after they left, I cried in the bathroom while the kids laughed and painted in the next room. It hurt so much to know that the people who raised me couldn't see the beauty in what I was doing. Still, I didn't stop. Years passed, and my art therapy program slowly began to grow. We started partnering with schools, hospitals, even small charities. It wasn't making me rich, but it filled my soul. Then one day disaster struck. The landlord who owned the studio sold the building without warning. The new owner wanted to turn it into a parking lot. I was given 30 days to leave. I had no savings, no backup plan. I went to my parents, just hoping they'd help me this once. I stood in their living room, clutching my eviction notice, my voice trembling. "Mom, Dad, I just need a small loan. I'll pay it back, I swear. This program helps so many kids. Please." My mother looked up from her glass of wine. "Rachel, how long will you keep chasing this little dream? You're 30 now. When will you grow up?" "Grow up?" I repeated. "You mean stop caring about people?" Her face hardened. "I mean start doing something that makes sense. You've embarrassed this family enough." My father sighed. "Your mother's right. You chose your path. We can't keep rescuing you from your own bad decisions." I blinked, stunned. "Rescuing me? You've never even tried to help me." And that's when it happened. My mother stood up, her face red with anger, and said the words that still echo in my mind. "Rachel, you're not up to the standards of this family." He pointed to the door. "Get out." I felt my knees weaken. My own mother, someone I had loved unconditionally, was kicking me out of the only home I'd ever known. My brother stood by the stairs, watching quietly. He didn't say a single word. I packed my things while my mother's heels clicked across the marble floor behind me. As I stepped outside, she said, "You'll thank me one day when you finally realize how far beneath us you've fallen." The door slammed. It was winter. Snow covered the ground, and I had nowhere to go. My clothes were stuffed in an old duffel bag. My car, a rusty Toyota Corolla, barely started. I sat in it all night, crying until my eyes swelled shut. That was the night everything changed. That was the night I promised myself I'd never need them again. Over the next few years I worked 3 jobs, waitressing, cleaning offices, and teaching art classes. I lived in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment in downtown Boston. It wasn't easy. There were nights I ate instant noodles for dinner and prayed my car wouldn't break down. But even through all that pain, something inside me refused to give up. Because deep down I knew, kindness mattered. Empathy mattered. Even when it didn't pay the bills. And then, something unbelievable happened. One morning while scrolling through my emails, I saw a message that made my heart stop. It was from a philanthropy organization in New York called Healing Hearts Foundation. They had seen a small video online of one of my art therapy sessions, recorded by a volunteer, and they wanted to sponsor my program. First I thought it was a scam. But it wasn't. They offered me funding to expand the colors of healing across multiple cities. They said my work had touched people deeply, that my story inspired hope. I cried so hard that day I could barely speak. That moment was the start of something huge. But I didn't know then, didn't even imagine, that this new chapter of success would one day bring me face to face again with the same people who called me a failure. My family. The Morgans. And the next time they saw me, it wouldn't be as the girl they threw away. It would be as the woman they'd have to answer to. Because fate has a funny way of turning the tables. When life starts to change for the better, it rarely gives you a warning. You don't hear music playing or see fireworks go off. It happens quietly, slowly, until one day you realize you're standing in a completely different world. That was me, Rachel Morgan, 5 years after being kicked out of my parents' house. For those just joining in, my name's Rachel, I'm 35 now, and if you're watching from the United States or Canada, I want you to picture this. A woman once called a family embarrassment, now walking into rooms filled with people who actually believed in her. People who didn't care about her last name or her bank account, but her heart. Started small. The Healing Hearts Foundation helped me rent a new studio in downtown Boston. Then local schools began inviting me to teach. Hospitals reached out for therapy partnerships. Before long, the Colors of Healing wasn't just a tiny art program anymore. It was a movement. I was working with children who had lost parents, families struggling after fires, and veterans healing from trauma. We painted, sculpted, drew. Every color had a story. I saw laughter where there used to be pain, and I began to understand that real success wasn't measured by money. It was measured by lives touched. Still, deep inside, I carried the echo of my mother's voice. "Rachel, you're not up to the standards of this family. Sometimes those words haunted me. They followed me even as my name started appearing in local papers, as TV stations began calling for interviews. Every achievement came with a quiet whisper in my head. Would she finally be proud of me now? But I always shook the thought away. I told myself it didn't matter. I didn't need her approval anymore. Or at least that's what I wanted to believe. A year later, the program had expanded into 4 cities. We had over 20 volunteers, a team of therapists, and hundreds of kids participating each month. I worked day and night not because I had to but because it made me feel alive. Then came the invitation that would change everything. I remember sitting at my desk one evening, sorting through emails, when my assistant, Lena, handed me a cream-colored envelope with a gold seal. "This one looks fancy," she said with a grin. I opened it carefully. Inside was an invitation to the Boston Hope Charity Gala, one of the most prestigious events in the city, an event my parents had hosted many times before. My eyes widened as I read further. The organizers had chosen the Colors of Healing as one of the featured programs for that year. They wanted me to give a short speech about the power of art in recovery. Froze. My hands shook slightly. Lena noticed. "Rachel, you okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just surprised." She leaned on my desk. "You should be proud. This is huge. You're finally getting recognized by the people who never gave you a chance." I laughed softly. "Yeah, the same people who said I was wasting my life." But she didn't understand. This wasn't just another event for me. It was a collision course with my past. The Morgans would be there. My mother, my father, my brother. The same people who shut their doors on me when I needed them most. For nights, I debated whether I should go. Part of me wanted to skip it, to avoid reopening old wounds. But another part, the stronger part, knew I had to face them. This wasn't about revenge. It was about showing myself that I had survived. That I was enough. The night of the gala arrived. The city sparkled with winter lights, and Boston's finest gathered at the Grand Carlton Hotel, dressed in glitter and diamonds. I stood outside in a simple navy blue gown, clutching a small silver clutch. My hair was pinned back neatly, my heart racing beneath my calm exterior. "Ready," Lena whispered beside me. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers. Waiters floated around with trays of champagne. A live orchestra played softly near the stage. And there, near the center of it all, stood my family. My mother, Margaret, looked exactly the same, elegant, flawless, and cold. My father, Charles, wore the same measured smile he always did. And Ethan, my brother, was chatting with some corporate partners, his arm around his perfectly dressed wife. For a moment I froze. Time felt like it had stopped. Lena nudged me. "That's them, isn't it?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's them." We hadn't spoken in almost 6 years. Not a call, not a message, nothing. It was like I'd never existed to them. A waiter passed by offering champagne. I took a glass, more to calm my nerves than anything. As the announcer took the stage to begin introductions, I found myself staring across the room, and that's when it happened. My mother saw me. Her eyes locked on mine across the crowd. For a split second, her expression faltered. Then she straightened, lips pressing into a thin line. She whispered something to my father. He turned, saw me, and his jaw tightened. I could almost hear her voice in my head. "What is she doing here?" But I didn't move. I stood tall, smiled politely, and took a sip from my glass as if nothing in the world could shake me. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host began, "please welcome one of tonight's featured speakers, founder of the Colors of Healing, Ms. Rachel Morgan." The crowd applauded as I walked to the stage. My heart thudded in my chest. My mother's face was frozen in shock. I smiled at the audience, holding the microphone steady. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Rachel Morgan, and I'm here to talk about the beauty of second chances." I spoke about art, about healing, about kindness. I shared stories of children who found hope again through creativity. The room was silent, every pair of eyes focused on me. And when I finished, there was a long, emotional applause. Some people even stood. As I stepped down from the stage, I could feel my mother's gaze burning into my back. Lena whispered, "You did it." But before I could respond, I heard a voice behind me. "Rachel." Turned. It was Ethan, my brother. He looked older, tired maybe, but still had that same confident smile. "Ethan," I said quietly. "I didn't expect to see you here," he admitted. "You were amazing though. I didn't know you'd built something this big." "Neither did anyone," I replied, my tone soft but firm. "I guess sometimes people just have to see for themselves." He nodded slowly, glancing toward where our parents stood. "They're surprised." "I bet they are." Then, for the first time in years, my brother hesitated. His expression softened. "Rachel, Before he could finish, I heard the sharp, unmistakable click of heels approaching. My mother. She stopped just a few feet away, staring at me with that same mixture of pride and discomfort, like she couldn't decide whether to hug me or slap me. "Rachel," she said at last. "It's been a long time." I met her gaze steadily. "It has." She glanced around at the people watching us, then smiled faintly, the kind of smile meant for appearances. "You've done well for yourself, I see." I could tell every word tasted bitter in her mouth. "Yes," I said calmly. "It's been a journey." There was silence between us. Thick, heavy silence filled with all the things we hadn't said. And then, out of nowhere, she leaned slightly closer and whispered, "Don't let this get to your head. One successful program doesn't make you one of us." I felt my heart twist, but I refused to let her see me flinch. I smiled instead. "You're right, Mother. I don't want to be one of you." For a second, her eyes widened, like she hadn't expected me to talk back. Then she straightened, face hardening again. "Watch yourself, Rachel. People like you can fall as quickly as they rise." And with that, she walked away. Lena grabbed my arm, whispering, "What did she just say?" But I couldn't answer. My mind was racing. That night, as the gala continued, something inside me shifted. I realized this wasn't the end of my story with my family. It was only the beginning. Because what none of us knew then was that fate was about to twist things again. And this time the Morgans, the proud, untouchable Morgans, would need me more than I ever needed them. And when that day came, I'd have to decide whether to show mercy or finally walk away for good. The morning after the gala, I woke up to the sound of the city humming outside my apartment window. Boston was alive. Cars honking, people rushing, coffee shops already bustling. But inside me, something heavier was stirring. Even after all the applause, all the congratulations, all the smiles from strangers, my mother's words echoed in my mind. "People like you can fall as quickly as they rise." I had spent years trying to forget them, but that one sentence felt like a warning. A challenge even. Lena knocked softly on my door with a tray of coffee. "You didn't sleep much last night," she said, setting the cups down. "I couldn't," I admitted. Mom's words just lingered. She shook her head. "You let them see you shine. That's all you can do. Don't let them get inside your head." I nodded, but deep down I knew the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The following week was a blur of interviews, planning sessions, and meetings with new sponsors. The Colors of Healing was growing faster than I ever imagined. The foundation offered me a grant to open a second location in Toronto, Canada. That meant hiring more staff, coordinating travel, and securing more funding. It was exciting, exhausting, and exhilarating all at once. But then came the call. It was my father. "Rachel," he said, voice tight, almost strangled. "We need to talk." Froze. My hands gripped the phone tightly. "About what?" asked carefully. "Not here," he said. "Meet me at the Morgan estate this evening. Alone." For a moment I wanted to hang up. Ignore him. Let him stew in whatever pride made him call. But curiosity and a strange sense of anticipation made me agree. Fine. 7 p.m. The entire day I couldn't focus. Every task at work felt mechanical. Lena noticed, but I waved her off, assuring her it was nothing. That evening I drove to the estate, the same place where I had been thrown out years ago. It looked almost the same, but the lights and decorations made it feel different, almost intimidating. My stomach churned with every step toward the door. Charles greeted me with a stiff nod. "Rachel," he said. No hugs, no warmth. Just the formal tone of a man who had never allowed affection. I followed him inside, past the familiar marble floors and the grand staircase that had once seemed so intimidating. We entered the study, a room lined with dark wood shelves filled with books and old family portraits. He closed the door behind us. Silence hung heavy. Then he spoke. "Rachel, things have changed. We've made mistakes." Blinked. "Mistakes?" I asked, my voice calm but wary. "Yes," he admitted, rubbing his forehead. "Your mother and I. We've lost a lot. In business. Investments went bad. Then he's struggling. And we." He paused, struggling for words. "We need your help." I laughed softly, the sound brittle. "Help? You mean like when I needed help and you kicked me out?" He winced. "That was different." I shook my head. "No, that was exactly the same. You saw me struggling and you let me fall. Now, suddenly you need me." He didn't answer. Then came the knock at the door. My mother walked in, elegant as ever, her eyes sharper than knives. "Rachel," she said smoothly, "we didn't expect this situation to come to you." I stared at her, studying the woman who had once broken me with a single sentence. "Rachel, you're not up to the standards of this family." The words were still sharp in my mind, cutting deeper than any blade. "We've lost everything," she said quietly, almost pleading. We need your expertise to help restructure our companies, our charities, our affairs." I felt a strange wave of power rise inside me. For years they had thought of me as nothing. Now here I stood, a woman who had built a life from scratch, whose name was respected in 2 countries, whose work inspired hundreds of people. And they needed me. I leaned back in the chair, calm and collected. "So let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You lost your fortune, and now you need the girl you humiliated to fix everything." They didn't respond. Then my mother stepped closer, her voice almost a whisper. "Rachel, please. Don't make us regret reaching out." I smiled. Not the fake smile they wanted, but a quiet, knowing smile. "You should have thought about that 6 years ago." Charles opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "No. Listen. You treated me like I was worthless. You thought I'd never amount to anything. And I forgave you silently for years. But forgiveness doesn't mean I have to help. It doesn't mean you get an easy way back into my life." My mother's face flushed, anger and disbelief warring with a flicker of regret in her eyes. "And yet," I continued, voice steady, "you're here, begging me. That's poetic justice, isn't it?" They said nothing. For the first time in years I realized I held the power. They were no longer the untouchable Morgans. They were desperate, fragile and dependent. And I could choose to give them mercy, or to walk away entirely. But just as I began to process my options, a sudden crash came from the hall outside. The front window shattered. Glass flew everywhere. I ducked instinctively. A masked figure darted into the room. My father shouted. My mother screamed. The intruder lunged toward the desk, grabbing a folder of documents. Everything moved in slow motion. I felt my heart hammer in my chest. The room smelled of cold metal and fear. And in that moment I realized, this wasn't just about money or forgiveness anymore. Something far more dangerous was happening. The life I had fought so hard to build, and the family I had once lost, were now entangled in something I had never anticipated. And as the intruder disappeared into the night with the documents, I knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, the shattered glass of the front window glinted in the weak sunlight. My parents' estate, once a symbol of their power and control, now looked vulnerable, exposed. I stood on the marble floor of the foyer, staring at the mess, my hands still trembling from the shock of the previous night. Lena had insisted on coming along for safety, but I had insisted she stay behind. "This is my battlefield," I had said quietly. Margaret, my mother, paced back and forth like a caged tiger, her heels clicking on the marble. Charles sat in his chair, silent and withdrawn, staring at the ground as if the world had suddenly grown too heavy for him to bear. Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his usual confident demeanor replaced with a pale, haunted look. "Do you have any idea who did this?" I asked, keeping my voice calm but firm. Charles shook his head. "No, I don't. Everything is in chaos. Some of our most critical documents, gone." I clenched my fists. My mind was already racing. This isn't just a burglary, I thought. It's personal. Someone knew exactly what they were after. Margaret stopped pacing and faced me. "Rachel, we didn't know where else to turn. You're the only one who can fix this." I looked at her, my expression unreadable. "Fix what exactly?" asked, my voice low. "The mess you've created with greed and arrogance. The chaos you refused to see for years. You want me to rescue you now." Ethan's voice cut in. "Rachel, please. Don't let pride get in the way. We need your help before it's too late." I studied him for a long moment. My brother, the golden child, had always been untouchable in their eyes. But now he looked vulnerable, weak even, and I felt a surge of both power and caution. "You want my help," said slowly. "You'll need to prove to me that you're serious, that you're willing to take responsibility for what's happened, not just ask me to clean up your mess." Margaret's eyes flashed with a mixture of desperation and anger. "We'll do anything," she said quickly. "Anything you ask." I let my gaze drift around the room. The truth was clear. They had underestimated me, dismissed me, humiliated me, and now they were powerless without my expertise. And for the first time I felt the intoxicating mix of satisfaction and responsibility. But before I could respond, the sound of a car screeching outside made all of us jump. A sleek black SUV pulled up in the driveway, and two men in dark suits stepped out, moving quickly toward the house. Who are they?" Ethan asked nervously. I didn't answer immediately. My instincts screamed that this was connected to the theft from last night. I had built a life on reading people, understanding motives, and predicting moves. And I knew immediately. These men were not here for small talk. Margaret's voice trembled. "They're investors. From New York. They..." cut her off. "No. They're here for the documents. They know what's missing." Within moments, the men were inside, surveying the room with cold, calculating eyes. One of them spoke, his tone clipped and direct. "We've been instructed to recover certain materials. It's in everyone's interest that this goes smoothly." I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't just a robbery. This was organized. Someone knew the exact value of what was stolen, and they were coming for more. Charles cleared his throat. "We can negotiate." "No," I said sharply. "You don't get it. This isn't about negotiation. This is about survival. And right now, the only person in this room who can keep us from losing everything is me." The men looked at me surprised, then nodded slightly. That's when it hit me. My parents had built empires, yes, but they had no idea how to protect them. They didn't know how to anticipate threats, how to safeguard secrets, or how to navigate crises. I did. And now, their survival depended on the very person they had once called a failure. I turned to face them. "We have to act quickly. Every hour that passes, those documents, and everything tied to them, falls into the wrong hands. We'll need a plan. And you," I said, pointing at my mother and father, "will follow my lead. No excuses." Margaret's lips tightened, but she nodded. Ethan's jaw clenched, but he remained silent. I pulled out my phone and began making calls. I coordinated with cybersecurity experts, lawyers, and private security. I accessed backup files, scanned for vulnerabilities, and mapped out a strategy to recover the stolen documents before they were misused. Hours passed. The tension in the house was suffocating. My parents were uneasy, unsure of how to act, while I moved with precision, directing people, making decisions, taking charge. And with each passing moment, I felt the balance of power shift. Then, as night fell, another unexpected event shook the house. A loud explosion rattled the windows, sending dust and shards of glass into the grand foyer. Fire alarms blared. Smoke filled the room. The intruders had returned, and this time they weren't subtle. Margaret screamed. Charles rushed to shield her. Ethan grabbed a lamp to defend himself. I felt a strange clarity. Fear was there, yes, but beneath it, a fierce determination burned. I knew we had to survive, and we had to protect the legacy they had once valued more than anything. Wealth, power, reputation. And in that moment, I realized that my childhood lessons about empathy, courage, and resilience weren't just abstract ideals. They were survival tools. Because sometimes, the greatest test of kindness is not in how gently you treat the world, but in how fiercely you protect it. As the smoke thickened and the flames crept closer, I took a deep breath. My parents were terrified, Ethan was panicking, and the intruders were closing in, but I had a plan. And it was going to change everything. The fire alarms screamed like banshees, the smell of smoke thick in the air. I could barely see through the haze, but my mind was sharp, racing with every possible scenario. My parents were huddled together near the stairs, Ethan brandishing a chair like it would ward off intruders. I took a deep breath and assessed the situation. "Stay close to me," I commanded, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Move slowly and carefully. Do exactly what I say, and we'll get through this." Margaret's eyes widened. "Rachel, what do we do?" "You listen," I replied firmly. "No sudden movements. No heroics." Ethan glanced at me, his face pale, but he nodded. For the first time it felt like he saw me as more than just a disappointment. He saw me as a leader. The intruders were professionals. They didn't hesitate, didn't panic, didn't flinch at the flames or the alarms. Their goal was clear: recover the stolen documents, and perhaps more. But they hadn't counted on me. I dashed to the study, grabbing an emergency file I had hidden years ago, a digital backup of all the critical documents, encrypted and secure. If they got their hands on the originals, it would be catastrophic. But with this backup, I could negotiate from a position of strength. One intruder appeared in the doorway, masked and menacing. I didn't scream. I didn't freeze. Instead, I held the folder of backup files in one hand and a heavy paperweight in the other. "This ends now," I said. My voice was calm, unwavering. "Leave, or I call security, and the police are on their way." He froze for a split second, assessing me. Then, without warning, the second intruder lunged from behind. I barely dodged, knocking over a chair in the process. The first man stepped forward, ready to strike, but something in his eyes told me he wasn't used to resistance. I didn't have time to think. I ran, grabbing my parents' hands and pulling them toward the side exit. Smoke swirled around us, flames licked at the corners of the room, and glass shattered underfoot. We made it outside into the cold night air. The streetlights glinted off the snow-covered driveway, and my lungs burned with every breath. But just as I thought we were safe, a car screeched to a halt at the end of the street. Out stepped a familiar figure. Ethan's business partner, Mark Holloway. His suit was impeccable, his smile wide, but his eyes were calculating. "Rachel," he said smoothly, almost too smoothly. "I think we need to talk." I narrowed my eyes. "You're part of this, aren't you?" He shrugged innocently. "I don't know what you mean. But if you've recovered the files, I'd like to see them." Something about his tone set off alarms in my mind. I had trusted him. He had been Ethan's right-hand man, someone our family relied on. But now I wasn't so sure. I stepped back. "No, not until the authorities are involved." Mark smiled faintly. "You don't need them, Rachel. You have all the power here. But power can be dangerous if used wrongly." I felt a chill run down my spine. Here was someone I thought I could trust, standing between me and the safety of my family, And he wasn't telling the truth. Before I could react, the masked intruders appeared again, now regrouped and more aggressive than before. Mark glanced at them, a subtle nod passing between them, and my stomach sank. He was in on it. My parents gasped. Margaret grabbed my arm. "Rachel, what do we do?" I swallowed hard. My mind raced. Had to think fast. Years of experience running my programs, handling crises, and navigating danger all came to the forefront. But this was different. This wasn't just about my life or my career. It was about the people who had once tried to break me, now relying on me for survival. I turned to face Mark, my gaze steady. "If you want the files, there's one condition." His smile widened. "And that is, you walk away. You leave my family alone. No threats, no games, no lies. And you'll tell everyone else to do the same." He tilted his head, assessing me, weighing the options. "And if I refuse?" I pulled the backup drive from my bag and held it high. "Then you lose everything. The authorities are already tracing the files. You step 1 foot out of line, and it's over for you." Mark's eyes flickered, a mixture of anger and respect passing through them. Then slowly he nodded. "Very well, Rachel. Very well." I exhaled, relief mixing with adrenaline. But I knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of a new kind of battle. One that would test not just my intelligence but my compassion, my judgment, and my heart. That night, as the snow fell silently around the estate, I realized that my childhood lessons, about kindness, empathy, and perseverance, weren't just abstract ideals. They were my weapons, my shields, and my compass. Because life wasn't just about surviving, it was about rising stronger after every fall, about helping others even when they once doubted you, and about holding your ground when the world tried to knock you down. And as I looked at my parents, trembling and humbled before me, I knew one thing. They would never see me as a failure again. But would I let them back in? That was the question lingering in the cold night air. The morning after the chaos, the Morgan estate was eerily quiet. Snow had settled over the shattered windows and scorched walls, turning the damage into a surreal, almost beautiful landscape. But inside, the tension was thick, unspoken, and suffocating. I sat at the long mahogany table in the dining room, my hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. My parents and Ethan were there too, sitting stiffly, their eyes downcast. For the first time in years, the usual arrogance and certainty that had defined them were gone. They looked small, vulnerable, human. Margaret broke the silence first. Her voice was soft, almost fragile. "Rachel, I don't know what to say." Don't," I interrupted gently but firmly. "Don't say anything yet. Right now I need you to listen. And you need to understand something very important." I took a deep breath, gathering the strength that had carried me through years of rejection, struggle, and now near disaster. "You taught me lessons, yes. But most of them were painful. You told me I wasn't good enough. You humiliated me. You told me I was a disappointment. And for years I carried that with me. I doubted myself because of you. But I survived. And I've built something meaningful because I refused to give up." They stared at me, silent. Charles's hands twitched, as though he wanted to speak but feared the words would fail him. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. I continued, my voice growing steadier. "Now you are in a position you never expected. You are afraid. You need help. And the question isn't whether I can help you. I've already proven that. The question is whether I should." Margaret's lips trembled. "Rachel, please, we've changed. We understand now." I shook my head slowly. Do you understand what it felt like to be cast aside? To be treated like I didn't matter? Because understanding doesn't undo the years you tried to break me. Doesn't erase the pain. What it does is give me a choice. And I get to decide whether to forgive. Whether to let you back into my life. Or to walk away forever. Ethan's voice finally broke the silence. "Rachel, I held up my hand. "Not yet. I'm not ready for apologies. I'm ready to see action. I'm ready to see real change. You want my help? Then follow my rules. You want my forgiveness? Then show me consistently that you respect me and the people I care about. That's the only way this works. My mother's eyes glistened with tears. We will, Rachel. Anything you say, we'll do it. I leaned back, feeling a strange mix of power and caution. I was no longer the frightened girl hiding behind her art. I was Rachel Morgan, a woman who had built a life from nothing, a woman who had faced danger, betrayal, and fear, and survived. But just as the first hint of hope settled in the room, my phone buzzed. It was a secure message from the cybersecurity team I had contacted after the theft. My heart sank as I read it. The intruders hadn't disappeared. They had left a trail, encrypted, hidden, but unmistakable. Someone was still after the documents. And worse, the message indicated that the theft was larger than anyone had realized. Our family secrets weren't just at risk, they were being weaponized. I felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the clarity that always came when danger loomed. This isn't over, I said, my voice steady. They're still out there, and we need to act before they strike again. We need to secure everything, protect everyone, and find out who's behind this. Margaret's hand trembled as she reached for mine. Rachel, please help us. We'll do whatever it takes. I nodded slowly. I will help you. But make no mistake, I am not your child anymore. I am my own person. You respect me. You follow my lead. And you do exactly what I say. Or this ends. Forever. They both nodded, fear and humility clear on their faces. Ethan exhaled shakily, finally meeting my eyes. I'm ready, he said. For the first time in years, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and unease. The Morgans had finally realized that power wasn't always about money or status. It was about trust, action, and respect. And now they were at my mercy. But just as I began to feel a sense of control, a new message arrived on my phone, this one from an unknown number. It read simply, "You think you're in control. You're not. The real threat is closer than you think. And if you fail, everything dies." I stared at the screen, my heart racing. This was bigger than I had imagined. The intruders weren't working alone. There was someone inside our circle, a betrayer we hadn't yet uncovered. I turned to my parents and Ethan. Someone here is playing a dangerous game. And if we're not careful, someone will pay the ultimate price. The room went silent, the weight of the unknown pressing down on us. For the first time, I realized that my journey wasn't just about rescuing my family from their mistakes. It was about protecting them from someone who had been hiding in plain sight. And as I looked at their anxious faces, I knew one thing for certain. The next move had to be mine. The tension in the Morgan estate had reached a breaking point. Every shadow, every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of light felt like it could hide danger. I paced the study, my mind running through every scenario, every possible angle. Whoever had orchestrated the theft, whoever had threatened us, was still out there. And now, I knew with certainty they were someone we trusted. For those just joining, I'm Rachel Morgan, 35 years old, and this is the story of how the people who once called me a failure, the ones who threw me out and never believed in me, ended up needing me for their survival. I called a meeting with my parents and Ethan. "Listen carefully," I said, my tone steady. "We have a traitor among us. Someone who knows everything about our finances, our charities, and our secrets. Someone who has been manipulating events from behind the scenes." Margaret's face paled. "Rachel, who could it be?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't know. But whoever it is, they're smart. Too smart to be random." I took a deep breath. "It's someone with access. Someone close. And they've underestimated me just like you all once did. But I'm going to find them, and when I do, they're going to regret ever thinking they could control this family. Or me." For the next several days, I worked tirelessly. I analyzed digital footprints, tracked financial transactions, and interviewed every person who had been near the documents. I scrutinized emails, phone records, even office attendance logs. Slowly, the puzzle pieces started to form a picture. And then it hit me. Mark Holloway, Ethan's trusted business partner. The man who had smiled at me during the fire, who had given the illusion of loyalty. He was the architect of the entire scheme. He had coordinated the theft, the intruders, the threats. And now he was trying to manipulate my family into submission, thinking I would be powerless without him knowing it. I didn't act rashly. I knew better than to confront him without evidence. I called in private investigators, traced his communications, and secured proof of his involvement. Every transaction, every phone call, every whispered instruction, recorded, documented, undeniable. The confrontation was inevitable. I arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a small conference room in a secure building downtown. My parents and Ethan accompanied me, but they stayed silent, watching as I prepared to face the man who had caused so much chaos. Mark arrived, confident, calm, unshaken. "Rachel," he said smoothly, "I see you've done some digging." "You underestimate me," I replied evenly. "And that's your mistake. Every move you made, every threat, every lie, you left a trail. And I followed it." His smile faltered slightly. "You don't know what you're dealing with." "I know enough," I said, sliding the folder of evidence across the table. "Your plans, your accomplices, your threats. It's all here. And it ends today." He leaned back in his chair, trying to regain control. "And what are you going to do? Arrest me? Ruin me?" "I'm going to do what you never expected," I said. "I'm going to protect my family, my program, and the people I care about. And I'm going to make sure you never hurt anyone again." Mark's expression changed from arrogance to panic as the investigators stepped into the room behind me. He realized the game was over. In a matter of minutes, he was facing the consequences of his actions. Back at the estate, the atmosphere had shifted. My parents, humbled and exhausted, looked at me with a mixture of awe and disbelief. They had finally seen me, not as a failure, not as a disappointment, but as someone capable, resilient, and fearless. Margaret spoke first. "Rachel, I can't believe we misjudged you for so long." I shook my head gently. "It's not just about misjudgment, Mother. It's about respect, trust, and accountability. You didn't give me that when I needed it. But now you have a choice." Charles stepped forward, his voice quiet. "We want to make it right. We see now what truly matters." I looked at them, feeling a surge of power, clarity, and empathy all at once. "You have to prove it," I said. "Actions speak louder than words. If you want a place in my life, you'll have to earn it, just like anyone else. But I won't hold a grudge forever." Ethan nodded, finally understanding. "I get it, Rachel. Really do. And I'll do whatever it takes." Weeks later, life slowly returned to a sense of balance. The colors of healing expanded further, now with secure funding, expanded staff, and a growing reputation across the United States and Canada. The threat of betrayal had been neutralized, and my family, though still learning, began to understand the lessons I had carried with me for years. Kindness, resilience, and the strength to rise after being broken. I didn't allow my parents back into my life immediately. Forgiveness, I had learned, took time. But I did allow them to witness my success, to see that the girl they once dismissed had become a woman who could face danger, rebuild what was broken, and protect the people she loved. And most importantly, I realized that the pain of the past had shaped me, not destroyed me. It had given me the wisdom to navigate treachery, the empathy to lead with compassion, and the courage to rise even when everyone around me doubted my worth. I had gone from a girl my mother called a failure to a woman who not only survived but thrived, and in the process, I had taught my family the greatest lesson of all, that true strength is measured not in wealth or status, but in integrity, courage, and heart. As I stood in my new Toronto studio one afternoon, watching children paint and laugh, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The world hadn't been easy, and life had thrown everything at me, but I had turned every challenge into a step forward. And somewhere in the distance, I knew my parents were watching, not with judgment or expectation, but with quiet respect. Because finally, after all those years, they had learned what I already knew. I was more than enough. And in that moment I smiled. Not because I had defeated my enemies or claimed victory over my family, but because I had claimed my life. I had become the person they never believed I could be. And nothing, no betrayal, no insult, no obstacle could take that away.